The sky was just beginning to darken over the quiet suburb of Redmond Ridge, 30 minutes outside Seattle. Street lamps flickered on, their yellow glow spilling across perfect sidewalks and trimmed lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood where cars slowed at stop signs even when no one was watching, where every front porch had a seasonal wreath and the hedges were always neatly cut. It was also the kind of place where a woman like Alondra Lewis didn't quite belong. At least, not to some. Alondra was 36. Broad-shouldered, strong-legged, the kind of strength earned from lifting crates, not gym memberships. Her face was angular, her jawline firm, her eyes always alert. She wore her uniform with pride, an orange zip-up jacket with reflective stripes, a matching hat pulled low over her braids, and black gloves with the fingertips worn thin. The delivery bag on her back was heavy, but she didn't complain. It was her last drop-off of the day. As she stepped out of the delivery van, a beat-up Dodge she leased herself, she double-checked the address. 1438 Maple Hollow Drive. Right house. Neatly painted numbers over the garage. A big white SUV in the driveway. Porch light already on. She reached into the insulated pack and pulled out the order, one large white box, carefully taped, with a sticker that read "Custom Cake, Fragile." Inside was a birthday cake shaped like a rocket ship ordered 2 weeks ago by a customer named Samantha Ward. Alondra had been extra careful with this one. No sharp turns. No sudden braking. The bakery had been crystal clear, a kid's birthday. Special design. Don't ruin it. So she walked slowly up the brick path, stepping over a sprinkler head and moving cautiously. She didn't see anyone at the window. No music. No barking dog. Just the still, quiet presence of wealth. Comfortable, settled wealth. She was about to ring the bell when she heard something behind her, a creak, a voice. Then a siren. Not from far away. From right there. 3 police cruisers pulled up within seconds. One skidded to a halt directly behind her van. Another blocked the house's driveway. Red and blue lights bathed the neighborhood in a wash of chaos. What the? Before Alondra could turn, 3 officers emerged from the cars. All white. All in full uniform. Guns on their hips. Bulletproof vests already fastened. One shouted, "Step away from the door." She froze. I said step away. She backed off the porch slowly, still holding the cake box. The second officer was already moving. He sprinted toward her, closed the distance in 3 seconds flat, and before she could explain a word, his boot slammed into her side. She hit the grass hard, the cake box launching into the air and tumbling into the bushes. Hands where we can see them. I'm delivering. Her voice cracked, breath knocked from her lungs. The third officer pinned her from behind, jamming his knee into her back. She screamed as the air left her chest again, muffled by the cold dirt. Suspect subdued, someone said over a radio. I'm not. Bag. Check the bag. A fourth cop she hadn't even seen before appeared, this one aiming his flashlight and service weapon at the delivery pack she'd dropped. What's inside? He barked. Alondra sobbed. It's empty now. It was just a cake. She tasted metal. Her jaw scraped against the pavement. What's in the damn bag? Please, she begged. I swear I'm a delivery driver. You can scan the code. Someone ripped off the bag. The zipper broke. Nothing but napkins. A delivery invoice. Spare gloves. Then the front door opened. A child, maybe 7 years old, burst out barefoot in pajamas with stars on them. He pointed wildly. That's her. That's her. She's bringing my rocket cake. The cops didn't move. The boy's mother came next, early 30s, blonde, still on a phone call. What the hell? That's the driver. She's from Frostbite Delivery. The mother grabbed the box from the bushes. It was dented but still sealed. She pulled out her phone and scanned the QR sticker on the lid. The screen lit up with Alondra's full profile, name, employee ID, active delivery status, and the words "Verified Delivery in Progress." The silence that followed was suffocating. Alondra was still on the ground, breathing hard, her arms bent painfully behind her back, the cold handcuffs biting her wrists. The child stood over her now, confused and crying. She didn't do anything. The mother turned to the police, furious. What is wrong with you? One of the officers stepped back. His voice cracked. We got a call. Woman acting suspicious near the house. Dark clothing. Black female. The mother looked like she'd been slapped. That's called being a delivery worker, she spat. Her voice was rising now. And you tackled her? While she was holding a birthday cake. In front of my kid. The boy knelt down beside Alondra. Are you okay? Her throat caught. She couldn't speak. Not because she was in pain, though she was. But because this boy, this innocent voice, had shown her more humanity than the men who were trained and paid to protect people like him and like her. Across the street, two neighbors had caught the entire thing. One had a Nest camera aimed right at the sidewalk. The other had filmed from his second-story window with his iPhone. By the time the cuffs were finally removed and Alondra was helped to her feet, the damage was done. To her. To the cake. To the idea of dignity. The video hit TikTok that night. It was 37 seconds long. No music. No filters. Just the moment a woman in an orange jacket was slammed to the ground while holding a white box with the words "Happy Birthday, Jalen" written on the lid in green cursive. The caption read, "This is what delivering cake while black looks like." Within 6 hours, it had 1 million views. By morning, it had 10. By the next evening, it was on CNN. Alondra didn't speak for 2 days. Her phone rang nonstop. Her manager offered paid leave. Her coworkers raised a GoFundMe. But she stayed inside her apartment on the south side of Seattle, curled on the couch with the shades drawn. Her back hurt. Her wrists were bruised. But that wasn't what broke her. It was the moment she realized how easily her life could have ended while trying to make a kid's birthday special. Then came the knock. Firm. Measured. She didn't answer at first. But the voice through the door was familiar. "Miss Lewis? It's Samantha Ward. Jalen's mom." Alondra opened the door slowly. Samantha stood there holding a box. "I brought the real cake," she said, forcing a smile. "We reordered it. He wanted you to have a slice." Alondra didn't speak. Samantha stepped inside gently, placed the box on the table, then pulled something else from her purse. "I also brought these." She handed over a stack of printed screenshots. Tweets. Messages. Comments. She didn't deserve this. She's somebody's daughter. She could have been killed. This is why we record everything. Alondra flipped through them, her fingers trembling. Then she stopped. One message in bold. "I want to hire her as my driver full-time." She delivered more than cake. She delivered courage. Alondra wiped her eyes. Finally she spoke. "I didn't want this attention." "I know," Samantha said. "But maybe the world needed to see it." Alondra didn't sleep that night. She sat by the kitchen table with the uneaten slice of birthday cake beside her. The frosting had smeared slightly in the box and the candles were still sealed in a small plastic pouch. Blue, red, green, cheap ones. But they were cheerful. Designed for joy. She stared at them for a long time. Then she stared at her phone. By midnight, the video of her being tackled had reached over 20 million views. The trending hashtag was #DeliveringWhileBlack. There were reaction videos, analysis breakdowns, and even an animated recreation. TikTok creators dramatized her fall frame by frame. Twitter users turned her uniform into a symbol of resistance. Her name, Alondra Lewis, was now in headlines. But she wasn't celebrating. She was scared. When the whole world is watching, they don't just see your pain, they pick it apart. She turned her phone face down and cried. The next morning, her phone buzzed again. Her brother, Marcus, was the first one to reach her. He lived in Portland with his wife and 3 kids. They hadn't spoken in weeks, not because of any falling out, but because life had its way of stretching the space between people. Now his voice was shaky on the phone. "Alone, are you okay?" "I'm breathing." "That video." "I know." Silence. Then Marcus spoke quieter. "I kept thinking, what if it wasn't a birthday cake? What if you reached for your bag and sneezed? What if—" "I know," she said again. Then louder, "I know." She didn't want to talk about it anymore. But she couldn't think about anything else. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived at the office of Frostbite Delivery. It wasn't addressed to the company. It was handwritten and sealed in a pale yellow envelope with no return address. Inside were 6 crumpled $20 bills and a child's drawing of a rocket ship. The note read, "I'm sorry they hurt you. I wish they knew you're nice. Happy birthday to me, but also to you. From Jalen." When the regional manager showed it to Alondra, she wept so hard she had to excuse herself to the bathroom. The police department issued its first statement on the 3rd day. It was a single paragraph. "We are aware of the incident involving Ms. Lewis and our responding officers. We are conducting an internal review. At this time, we are unable to provide further comment. No apology. No names. Just review." That night, a woman named Candace Ellison, civil rights attorney, former federal prosecutor, and now a well-known figure in legal advocacy, appeared on CNN and said simply, "This isn't a review issue. This is a reality issue. Black women aren't allowed to look ordinary, in white neighborhoods, because the moment they do, they're seen as threats. Ms. Lewis was delivering sugar, and she was treated like she was carrying a bomb. The clip went viral. Alondra stayed silent. She declined every interview. She told Frostbite she wanted to take a leave of absence. Her manager, Dev, said they'd hold her job, that he supported her, that the company was getting flooded with press inquiries. But Alondra didn't care about Frostbite's PR crisis. She cared about being able to walk down a street without her heart pounding out of her chest. She cared about going to sleep without hearing, "What's in the bag?" replaying in her ears. She cared about being seen, and still being safe. For days after the incident, Samantha returned. She brought flowers this time, and a folder. "I think you should see this," she said, handing Alondra a printed email. It was from the Wardridge Neighborhood Association. Subject line, Community Safety Alert Follow-Up. It read, "In response to the incident last week, we want to remind all residents to remain vigilant. While it's unfortunate that a delivery worker was mistakenly identified as a threat, the association's neighborhood watch was operating in good faith. There was no mention of the child, no apology, no acknowledgement that their vigilance led to a woman being pinned, cuffed, and nearly shot in front of a 7-year-old. Someone reported me for existing," Alondra whispered. "That's all I was doing." Samantha looked ashamed. "I didn't know they'd. I thought they'd take responsibility." "They never do," Alondra said flatly. On the 6th day, Alondra received a call from Kira Patterson, a journalist from the Seattle Gazette. Her voice was calm, firm, respectful. "I don't want a scoop," she said. "I want to listen. That's all." Alondra was quiet for a while. Then she agreed. They met at a small cafe downtown. No cameras, no entourage, just two women, one asking, one answering. Kira didn't push. She asked, "What do you want people to know that the video doesn't show?" Alondra thought for a moment. "That I wasn't scared at first." Kira raised an eyebrow. "You weren't?" "No. I was confused. And then embarrassed. Then scared." She sipped her tea. "But mostly, I felt small. Like all the things I'd worked for, my job, my schedule, my pride, they didn't matter. Like none of it could protect me." She paused. "And that's what makes me mad. Not the bruises. Not the viral video. It's that I had built something for myself. And in 1 second, they made me feel like nothing." Kira sat in silence. The quote made the front page the next day. Meanwhile, the pressure on the police department grew. Public rallies formed outside the station. A movement began online under the tag hashtag #HerNameIsAlondra. An artist in Atlanta painted a mural of her kneeling, cake in one hand, handcuffs broken on the ground. A GoFundMe started by her co-workers hit $50,000 in 3 days. Still, Alondra stayed low, not out of fear, but because her spirit was bruised in places no doctor could see. Then came the call that would shift everything. Candace Ellison, the attorney from CNN, left a message. "Alondra, I'd like to represent you. Free of charge. No strings. You deserve justice." Alondra didn't return the call right away. She wasn't sure what justice even looked like anymore. But when she did call back, her voice was firm. "I'm not doing this for money," she said. "I want change. Real change. Policy. Training. Accountability." Candace smiled through the phone. "Then let's go make it happen." The first hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Alondra arrived early, wearing a plain black blazer, blue jeans, and a soft gray scarf that her grandmother had knitted years ago. She didn't wear makeup. Didn't need it. Her presence said everything. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Activists filled the benches. Cameras weren't allowed, but phones buzzed in pockets. Fingers twitched at screens. Everyone was watching, whether in person or from home. The city had taken notice. The nation had paused. This wasn't just another incident anymore. This was a woman standing up in front of the people who had slammed her to the ground and saying, "I'm still here." Candace Ellison stood beside her. Calm, crisp, commanding. The 3 officers involved sat behind a separate table, their uniforms pressed, their expressions unreadable. One looked down the whole time. Another blinked constantly, jaw tight. The third, the one who had driven his knee into her spine, sat motionless, hands folded like nothing had ever happened. Alondra didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She knew what she remembered. The city council had been forced to hold a public inquiry. The footage had gone too far. Too many angles. Too much sound. The clip had reached 80 million views. Even federal officials had released vague statements about ongoing patterns of concern in law enforcement. But this hearing? This was Alondra's. Candace spoke first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call names. She just laid out the facts, cold, clear, and undeniable. Ms. Lewis was delivering a child's birthday cake. She wore a visible, company-issued uniform. She was verified in real time by the customer and her child. She was tackled, pinned, cuffed, and screamed at by 3 armed men, all because someone in the neighborhood thought a black woman with a delivery bag looked suspicious. We are not here for revenge. We are here for recognition. And then she said it. The police responded faster to a cake than they have to actual crimes in this city. What does that say about who we are? The room was dead silent. Alondra was asked to give a statement. She stood slowly, walked to the center of the chamber, and took a breath. I'm not used to speaking in front of people, she began. I usually just leave the package and go. A few people chuckled softly. She smiled once, then let it fall. But I'm here today because I could have died. And I wouldn't have even been holding a weapon. I would have been holding dessert. Pause. My life was almost reduced to someone else's misunderstanding. And if it wasn't for a child running outside and saying, "That's my birthday cake," y'all might be reading about my funeral. More silence. She looked directly at the councilwoman nearest her. I don't want anyone else to go through this. I want training. I want body cams on at all times. I want people to stop thinking that black equals danger. And I want every officer who tackled me to say my name out loud and admit I wasn't a threat. She looked over at the officer's table. I wasn't a threat. Outside the chamber, the crowd erupted into applause. But Alondra didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Every step she took that day felt heavier than the last. That night, back at home, she lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but one message stopped her cold. It was from her estranged father, Raymond Lewis. They hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. I saw you today. I didn't raise you, but I'm proud of the woman you've become. I'm sorry it took the whole country watching for me to say that. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She just turned off the phone and laid there, still, silent, worn. The next day, Jalen and Samantha visited again. This time, Jalen brought a card he made himself. It said, "Thank you for being strong. I want to be like you when I grow up." Samantha brought legal documents. She had written a formal letter to the neighborhood association demanding a retraction and apology for the community safety alert. "We're also leaving the neighborhood," she said flatly. "I can't raise Jalen somewhere that teaches him fear." Alondra was stunned. "You don't have to uproot your life for me," she said. "I'm not," Samantha said. "I'm doing it for him, because one day he'll be old enough to wear a hoodie. And I need to know the people around us won't be reaching for 911 every time he steps outside." They hugged at the door. And for the first time, Alondra didn't feel like a delivery worker. She felt like something more. By week 3, changes began. The police department announced that all 911 calls based on vague descriptions would now require follow-up before dispatch. The 3 officers were placed on indefinite leave. City Council approved funding for implicit bias training. And Frostbite Delivery made Juneteenth a paid company holiday in Alondra's name. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something. Candace called one night with big news. "You've been invited to speak at the National Conference for Law Reform in Atlanta." Headliner. Alondra nearly dropped the phone. "Me? You. I don't do speeches." "You do truth," Candace said. "That's better." When Alondra arrived at the conference, she wore the same gray scarf. She stood in front of a packed hotel ballroom filled with lawyers, judges, teachers, organizers, and teenagers. And she said, I'm not here because I wanted to be. I'm here because I was forced to be seen. But now that I am, I'm going to keep showing up. Because the next Alondra might not survive. And I want to make sure the world's already watching when that moment comes. The room stood before she even stepped off the stage. Later that night, a woman approached her, elderly, black, dressed in blue. She held Alondra's hands in both of hers and said softly, I cleaned offices in D.C. for 30 years. I was tackled once in 1979 for trying to open a side door with my janitor keys. They never said sorry. No one filmed it. No one cared. But I saw you. And you made me feel like maybe it mattered after all. Alondra choked on her words. But she managed to whisper, you mattered. You still do. Back in Seattle, she started something. A small nonprofit. 1 office. 2 desks. A bulletin board with faces and names and cases. She called it Every Step Counts. They trained delivery drivers on their rights. They documented misconduct. They offered therapy stipends for people recovering from routine violence. And every time someone told her she was becoming a figure, she said, no, I'm becoming a door. So others can walk through. The building they rented was nothing fancy, just a former tax office on a quiet street in South Seattle. Peeling beige paint, mismatched tiles, humming fluorescent lights. But to Alondra, it was sacred ground. Every Step Counts had only been open a month, but people were already walking through the door with stories. A Latina rideshare driver followed by a stranger and denied help at the precinct. A young man, deaf and nonverbal, tackled while reaching for a notepad. A mother whose teenage son was arrested while delivering groceries on foot. They didn't come for money or fame. They came because they were tired of being afraid and tired of being alone. And somehow word had gotten around that Alondra listened. She didn't wear a badge, didn't carry credentials. But when she sat across from someone, her silence was louder than any podium speech. She'd nod. She'd let them cry. And when they were done, she'd slide a pen across the desk and say, let's put it on paper. Because every story counted now. The media requests didn't stop. They wanted her on morning shows, late-night panels, documentaries. But Alondra only said yes when it served the mission. She sat down once with PBS, no makeup, no cue cards, and told her story as if talking to a neighbor over coffee. Calm, raw, unfiltered. I wasn't brave in that moment, she said. I was terrified. But the only reason I'm here is because a child screamed my name. That boy saved my life. Now I want to make that moment count. The clip was shared across classrooms, police trainings, and town halls. Teachers said students wept while watching it. An officer in Texas wrote an open letter saying, I've never questioned a dispatch call before. Now I will. Every time. Still, backlash found her. Online hate. Letters laced with coded threats. One morning, someone scrawled, stay in your lane, across the office door in red spray paint. Candace insisted on security upgrades. A panic button. Camera systems. Alondra refused to close. She painted over the door herself. Then she added a sign under the logo that read, if silence didn't save us, fear won't stop us. One afternoon, she received a call from the Seattle mayor's office. They were launching a new initiative, Justice in Motion, to reevaluate community police interactions in non-criminal incidents. They wanted her to serve as an advisor. She paused. I'm not a policy expert. You're the reason we're rewriting policy, the mayor said. That's more than enough. She attended the first task force meeting in a plain green hoodie and jeans. Other members arrived in suits. One official asked her, what experience do you bring? She stared at him. 6 bruises, she said, and 70 million witnesses. He didn't ask again. Meanwhile, her former company, Frostbite Delivery, partnered with her nonprofit to develop a Know Your Rights training module for gig workers. Alondra herself voiced parts of the video. Delivery shouldn't be dangerous, she said in the final line. But if it ever is, know you're not alone. Thousands of drivers downloaded the toolkit. Many sent thank you notes. One read, because of you, I filmed my traffic stop. They backed off. Jalen's mother, Samantha, stayed in touch. They'd moved out of the gated community to a more diverse, welcoming suburb nearby. Jalen had a new school, a best friend, and a framed photo of Alondra in his room, her holding the reordered cake, slightly cracked but still smiling. He calls you his superhero, Samantha said. Alondra laughed. I deliver words now, not cake. That's even better, she replied. But the work took a toll. Some nights, Alondra would sit in the empty office after dark, the hum of the ceiling fan the only sound. She'd read over case notes until her vision blurred. She'd remember the cold grass, the shouts, the gun pointed near her spine. There were days she didn't want to keep fighting. Days when the inbox felt heavier than her old delivery bag ever did. But then someone would knock. Or a letter would arrive. Or a mother would call and say, "You're the first one who believed us." And that was enough to come back in the next day. A year passed. The city of Seattle passed a reform package called the Lewis Accountability Act, requiring de-escalation training for all 911 operators, independent civilian oversight of non-emergency response calls, mandatory public transparency for anonymous complaints involving race or identity. Alondra attended the signing ceremony in the back row. She didn't want a speech. She just wanted to see the ink dry. One day, a group of college students invited her to speak. The topic, "What does justice mean to you?" She stood before them, hands folded. "It means I get to be tired," she said quietly. "It means I don't always have to carry everything alone. It means if a woman falls holding a cake, someone catches her before she hits the ground next time." A young woman in the crowd raised her hand. "How do you keep hope alive?" Alondra smiled softly. "I remember the boy who ran outside, and the woman who scanned the code, and the people who kept recording when others stopped watching. And then I remind myself I'm not the story. I'm the spark." Back at the office, Candace visited with news. "You've been nominated." "For what?" "The Presidential Medal of Freedom." Alondra froze. "Why me?" "Because you turned pain into purpose. And policy. That's the definition of freedom." Alondra didn't cry. She just whispered, "What now?" And Candace said, "Now we keep going. Every step still counts." The letter came by courier, sealed in ivory cardstock and watermarked with the presidential crest. Alondra opened it alone in her kitchen, steam rising from the pot of jasmine tea she'd forgotten on the stove. It was real. She had been chosen. In less than 3 weeks, she would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. Not for inventing something. Not for a decades-long career. But for showing the country what justice looked like while lying face down in the grass, clutching nothing more than a birthday cake. The letter shook in her hands. She sat down hard, elbows on the table. "Why me?" she whispered. When the news broke, the city erupted. Newspapers ran headlines like, "From Delivery to Dignity" and "Alondra Lewis, the Face of Change." But Alondra didn't bask in the praise. She returned to work at the nonprofit the very next morning, slipping in quietly through the back entrance before the press could swarm. A volunteer stopped her at the copier. "You know you changed everything, right?" "I didn't," Alondra said. "I just refused to stay down." The mayor of Seattle called. So did the governor. And then the president herself. They spoke for 12 minutes. "I watched the video," the president said. "But I remember your speech even more. You could have lashed out. You didn't. You taught." Alondra didn't know what to say. But as they hung up, the president's final words stayed with her. "You reminded us who this country is supposed to be." Still, the recognition came with weight. Online trolls resurfaced, this time louder, nastier. "You're making cops look bad. She should be grateful she wasn't shot. This is why real Americans get nervous." Alondra didn't respond. But the words burrowed. One afternoon, she turned off her phone for good and took a walk through the city. No security. No handlers. Just her hoodie, her keys, and an old pair of sneakers. She wandered without direction, passing grocery stores, nail salons, hardware shops. People recognized her. Some nodded. A few whispered. One little girl gasped and said, "Mom, that's the lady with the cake." Alondra smiled softly, then slipped into a nearby church. Empty pews. Faint scent of wood and wax. She sat down in the back, breathing. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered to no one. "I just wanted to do my job." A janitor sweeping the altar paused, looked up. "But maybe your job was never just deliveries," he said. "Maybe it was reminders." She blinked at him. "What kind of reminders?" "That people matter. Even when the world forgets." Back at the office, Candace was reviewing case files when Alondra walked in, wind in her hair and eyes strangely clear. "I've decided," she said. "About what?" "I'm not going to accept the medal for me." Candace sat up. "What do you mean?" "I want to accept it on behalf of every person who got hurt and never had a camera. Every woman who was tackled and called aggressive. Every teen who was cuffed because he ran, not because he was guilty." Candace nodded slowly. "And what will you say?" "I don't know yet. But it has to be something real." 2 nights later, Alondra stayed up writing. Page after page. Scratching out lines. Starting again. The candle beside her flickered. Her tea went cold. Then finally she stopped. And smiled. The day of the ceremony was clear and windless, the White House lawn lit by gentle spring sun. Rows of chairs were perfectly arranged, cameras mounted discreetly between hydrangea bushes and garden hedges. Alondra stood backstage with 10 other recipients, doctors, poets, veterans. She wore a simple dark dress and her gray scarf. When her name was called, the applause began before the president could even speak. People in the audience rose. Some wept. The president gestured to her and said, "This woman transformed a moment of violence into a movement for visibility. She reminded us that justice doesn't always shout, it often whispers while carrying a birthday cake." Alondra stepped forward. The medal was placed gently over her head. The cameras flashed. Then she turned to the podium. "I used to think my job was to deliver packages," she began. "But that night I learned I was carrying something else, something heavy and invisible, other people's fears. Their assumptions. Their history." She paused. The cuffs hurt, but not as much as realizing I had been made into a threat for simply existing. That's a pain a million Americans know too well. She looked up. "So I accept this medal not as a reward, but as a reminder. That every policy, every reform, every change you write must remember people like me. And more importantly, the people no one filmed." Silence. Then thunderous applause. Later that evening, she returned to her small apartment. No press. No motorcade. Just her. She removed the medal and placed it in a wooden box beside her grandmother's scarf and the drawing Jalen made a year ago. She opened her window, letting in the spring air. She breathed. She was still just Alondra. But now the country had seen her. And she wasn't going anywhere. A year had passed since the day Alondra Lewis stood on the South Lawn and received the nation's highest civilian honor. But for her, the most important days had nothing to do with medals, cameras, or speeches. They looked like this. A teenage boy walking into the Every Step Counts office after school, asking, "How do I talk to police without sounding scared?" A single mother mailing a donation with a note that said, "You gave me courage when my voice shook." A janitor named Dennis calling just to say, "I haven't been tackled, but I've been invisible. Thank you for seeing me." It was in these ordinary, quiet moments that Alondra felt the most present. Because long after the applause faded, the work remained. She still lived in the same apartment. Still brewed the same jasmine tea. Still rode the same old bike to work, refusing the electric scooter a nonprofit offered her as a gift. "It's not about ease," she told them. "It's about movement." And every day, someone new walked through the door of her little office needing to be heard. She listened. And she kept showing up. One Thursday morning, Alondra was invited to a middle school not far from where she grew up. The students had been studying civic changemakers and voted her as most inspirational modern leader. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She showed up, wore jeans, carried a single sheet of notes. When she entered the gymnasium, hundreds of kids stood and clapped. Most had never seen her in person. They only knew the video. The cake, the scarf, the silence. She walked to the front and faced them, her voice even and calm. "When I was your age," she said, "I thought being brave meant yelling louder than everyone else. Now I know it means staying still when the world pushes you. Staying kind when it doesn't make sense. And speaking even when your voice shakes." She held up a folded sheet of paper. "This," she said, "was the letter I wrote the night before I went to court. I didn't read it. I kept it for me. But I'm going to leave it here. Because maybe someone in this room will need it someday." She handed it to the principal, then turned to the kids. "Be loud with your kindness. Be firm with your boundaries. Be unshakable with your truth." The applause afterward didn't matter. The look in their eyes did. Outside, as she was leaving, a girl approached her, tiny, maybe 10 years old, in oversized sneakers. "You're the delivery lady," she whispered. Alondra smiled. "I guess I am." The girl hesitated, then held out a hand-drawn card. On the front was a picture of a woman holding a cake. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for delivering justice." Alondra's throat tightened. She knelt down, hugged the girl gently, and whispered, "And thank you for reminding me what it looks like." That night, Alondra sat on her porch, watching the light change across the rooftops. A letter sat in her lap, this one from Jalen. He had just turned 9. Inside was a photo of him holding a new cake. This one was shaped like a giant heart, and it had a single word in blue frosting. "Safe," the caption said. This time, the driver got to ring the bell. Alondra closed her eyes. The breeze smelled like honeysuckle and concrete. She thought of all the names no one would ever know. All the moments that never went viral. All the people who were hurt, forgotten, blamed. And she whispered to herself, "I carry them all. Not in protest. Not in pain. But in purpose." Because justice wasn't just about loud cases or big courtrooms. Sometimes, justice came with reflective stripes, cold fingers, and a promise not to give up. On the wall of her office, she later framed a new quote typed on a clean sheet of paper. The bravest people are the ones who show up before the world decides to watch. Years later, when Alondra retired and passed on the nonprofit to a new generation, they asked her what she wanted as her legacy. She pointed to a shelf. Just keep the cake box. It sat there, bent at the corners, stained with grass, and marked with one green cursive phrase. Happy birthday, Jalen. They placed it in a glass case. And below it, a brass plaque read. This woman delivered more than packages. She delivered the reminder that dignity is not earned, it is owed. Sometimes, the most powerful acts of resistance come from people simply doing their jobs. Alondra Lewis didn't set out to change the world, she just wanted to deliver a birthday cake. But her dignity, her courage, and her refusal to be silenced became a reminder that justice must begin with how we treat those we overlook. Real change starts when we finally see the people we've ignored. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on how small actions, listening, recording, speaking up can lead to powerful change. Share this video to keep Alondra's legacy alive, like it to support voices that often go unheard, and subscribe to help us tell more real stories that inspire justice, empathy, and change.